Nachos crew, it's Paul, Dr. Nacho. One of the things that I like to bring to our audience is important things that protect us as a community. And I'm very pleased and excited, but also somewhat sad that we have to do things like we're about to do today. Personal security for our practices, for ourselves, for our patients. I'm a member of the Vistage Business Group, and my guest today, Sam Rosenberg of the Live Ready Company, was one of the presenters there and gave a phenomenal presentation on personal security, active shooter training, the things we don't always want to think about in this world, but happen in this world, and we seem to see far too frequently. So I'd love to welcome Sam to our Talking Nachos program. You're welcome to start your video when you are ready, Sam, to talk with us. So Sam, I want to share with you, I'm really grateful for the presentation you gave at Vistage. You were there for about 2 hours or so. We did some in-person training and you showed a great PowerPoint. Our Nacho audience that's watching, we will have further programs with Sam, but what I want to talk to him today is a little bit about what he does, his backstory, why this is important. So Sam, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself to the audience and give us a little summary of what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Paul. I'm really glad to be here and I appreciate the opportunity. So the short of it is I've been in the business of protecting people and organizations and really teaching them how to protect themselves since about 1996. I've been in many ways dedicated my life to this subject matter. I first started as a U.S. Marine officer, got out in 96, kind of landed in the close protection world, which is a fancy pants way of saying bodyguarding. Protected some very high profile people, some of the most at-risk people on the planet. Probably at the time I was doing that work almost exclusively, the most high-risk people or high profile I was working with were high-ranking members of the Israeli government. Wow. And it was an interesting time because I was learning about security, not just from the perspective of security in general, but how to protect people who may be being, in fact, targeted. And it was a whole different kind of chess match, if you will. In 2003, I had a little bit of a philosophical shift. I decided that it's good to have a lifeguard, but ultimately you should know how to swim. And I decided to really pivot my career, and instead of really protecting people and organizations, I wanted to teach people how to protect themselves, really with the same skills and tools that we use to protect public figures. So fast forward over the last almost 20 years, we've worked with organizations, large and small, from dental practices and law firms and small businesses to schools to Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies. And a very large part of that has to do with personal protection and workplace violence prevention, otherwise known as, part of it is active shooter response.
Yeah, I appreciate that summary. And, I was just so impressed with what you had shared with us at this Vistage group. If we just kind of dial in or drill into, to pun intended, dental practice for a second, there was a tragic story not too long ago. I'm sure whenever there is something like this, people say, Sam, what do you think? Whenever there's a dentist in the news, they always think, Paul, what do you think? There was 2 dentists tragically killed by a patient who was upset about his dentures. Are these things, what, from your perspective, what are some awareness things for dental practices? If someone's just tuning in for the first time, what are some things that either A, you teach people, or B, they should be aware of if they're in a dental practice?
I think the most important thing for people to really understand is that the it'll never happen here mentality is still alive and well in our country, even with all of the things that we see on a daily basis in the news. And the first thing we have to understand is that violence can in fact happen anywhere. It can touch all of us. And functionally speaking, when you're a business owner as well as a professional, a dental professional, a doctor, you have to recognize that these kinds of things can happen. And it has very little to do in many ways with how nice of a person you are or how good you are at what you do. Sometimes it's just a matter of people are disturbed and they end up crossing paths with you. Now, that being said, I do want to tell you that one of the things that I teach, and this is one of the 2, what I call myths that we address every time we're training organizations or people. The first myth is the myth of randomness, that even though these things do happen and they happen everywhere, They are not, in fact, random. People have a tendency to use that term, and we hear it in the media. You know, they say it's a random act of violence, or someone just snapped, or nobody saw it coming. But the reality is, in every single event, virtually every single event, we can look back and very easily see the warning indicators in hindsight. One of the critical things that we do is teach you how to recognize those warning signs in advance. Basically, to know what to look for and how to look for it, so that if you recognize danger, you can immediately start to take preventative action.
Awesome. Yeah, I learned a lot about that at the Vistage thing. And you know, what's interesting, I live in Center City, Philadelphia, and people sometimes say, you know, are you scared? Are you nervous that you're in Center City? But what we see is these things are happening anywhere from suburban malls to cities to, sadly, schools. What are, you know, we pull back for a second and just talk, you know, I care so much about my team, and my team's listening, and people are saying, what about some just everyday things that you try to teach people about doing best practices for just being a little bit more aware, or being able to be more prudent, or I don't know, or purposeful about your own personal security?
So if we're talking the general idea of personal security, I mean, situational awareness is at the forefront. You know, we want to be able to keep our eyes open and recognize and see what's going on around us. If we're talking about workplace violence prevention, it's not a whole lot different. The signs are just a little more subtle sometimes. What I would tell you is that the number one thing I can tell you in a very short format like this is you have to trust your intuition. The word intuition comes back from the original root word intuere, which means to guard or protect. And that's literally what that mechanism does for us. Without getting into the mechanisms of how the brain works and how intuition basically interacts with us, what I want you to understand is that when you get a gut vibe that something's not right, I want you to pay attention. Yeah. And I know that sounds elementary, but so many people dismiss their intuition. The very first thing they do is they get a bad vibe that someone may have harmful intent towards them, or that someone's a creepy guy, or it doesn't seem right, whatever the situation is. And the first thing they do is, if they don't see any hard evidence that they can logically put into a list, if you will, they immediately dismiss it. They say, well, it's probably nothing, or I'm just overreacting, or, you know, I don't want to judge a book by its cover. And they go into sort of a social contract mode. And the idea here is by no means to recommend people should be profiling each other. That actually inhibits your ability to see what's really there. But what I really think is important is to not inhibit your own intuition, that when you get a warning vibe, just pay attention. And if you need to take action, do so. From the standpoint of defense against these critical incidents, these active shooter events that we just see so all too often nowadays, what I want you to remember is that the protocol, if you will, of the run, hide, fight protocol, which is becoming ubiquitous in our society. This is what law enforcement and security professionals are teaching. I think it's a very good process. It's kind of like the stop, drop, roll procedure. You know, you want to teach it to people so that they have a plan in advance. The real difficulty, though, with the run, hide, fight dynamic is the first step in all of it is you have to think. You have to recognize that there is danger, process it for a moment, and decide, am I going to run? Am I better off hiding or locking down, or do I have to fight back? And if you don't have the training in how to fight back, it's very, very difficult to do so. It's almost impossible to expect anyone to actually be able to without the right training. So training is a critical junction in this process. And unfortunately, I think you and I both would love not to have to even address these issues with our kids and with our clients and with our, fellows, our fellow professionals. But the reality is we have to. And as a result, training is the junction. That's where the rubber meets the road.
And you shared some of this at Vistage, and it seems like some of your thoughts is some of this, I don't know if I'll call it bad training or bad protocols would you say are resulting in more tragic outcomes and worse outcomes? Is that something that you would say?
Yeah. In many ways, and that's really the difficulty here, is that, we can all agree that certain things are good in some cases, but the problem you have is you've got people making decisions about what training should go, should be implemented into a workplace, or people making suggestions of how to perform or what to do under a crisis situation, who don't have the relevant background or experience to make those decisions or those suggestions. And in many ways, not having the right information, not knowing what to do and how to do it in the moment of truth, that is vetted and proven techniques or proven strategies, can in fact be much more detrimental than having no training. Yeah. So you've got to have the right information.
I appreciate that. Let's now bring back a little bit to this dental world, because after the most recent tragic shooting things, there were some dental offices posting on the group saying they were getting threats on the phone. Somebody was outside. Maybe this is all in your world, to be expected. When something happens in the media, there becomes, these things happening. And that, these dental practices, rightfully so, as I would be, they get scared, they get worried. What are some things, that you do with dental practices? Maybe you can share in person or through virtual learning. If someone was listening saying, hey, I'd like to connect with the Live Ready company and, figure this out. What are some of the training protocols that are available? Are they in person? Is there online? Are there customized ones? Share with us that.
Yeah, there's actually two dimensions to it. The training is a critical dimension. Another critical dimension is, in fact, what we would call a vulnerability assessment. So one of the things that where we usually start when we're working with a dental practice is we'll do a vulnerability assessment on the practice itself, and we'll see how easy it is for bad things to happen. And if someone wanted to harm people in that practice, what are some simple safeguards and safety measures that can be put in place to either inhibit it and deter it from happening in the first place, or to stop it entirely. So we want to look at the technological side. We also want to look at the human factor, and the human factor is the training. So one of the things that we've been working on, because of how big the dental world is, the practices are everywhere and we can't be everywhere, is we're looking at doing something along the lines of a do-it-yourself model. So, and this hasn't formally hit our website yet, but it's close. But what it is basically we can teach you how to do your own vulnerability assessment and apply tried and true practiced, principles to secure your workplace in a better way. In many ways, to kind of like sort of failure proof it, if you will. From a training standpoint, the same thing applies of how do we make sure that we can keep training in front of people, whether it's annual or whether it's new hires, making sure everybody's taught the same procedures and the same approach. And the way we're going to tackle that is typically through e-learning programming. Cool. So we're going to be developing programs specific for dental practices that will be rolled out. We could roll out very easily, and we could license to practices across the country. And that way there's an immediate deliverable of getting everybody on the same page of what to do in an emergency with the right information.
I think it's so key. I mean, being a dental practice owner, has transformed and maybe more complex over my life. We have a cybersecurity sponsor, and what you said resonated, because one of the things they do with their cybersecurity is they say, we go and check and see if there's any loose windows or open doors. And it sounds like you kind of actually do the physical version of what that would be, because they're doing the vulnerability assessment from cybersecurity, and you guys are doing this from physical security.
Precisely. And I want to make sure you understand, and I'm sure you do already, and our listeners and our viewers today understand, when we look at workplace violence, most people don't realize how prevalent it really is. It's an enormous, problem and systemic problem. But the dynamic here is that healthcare, outside of law enforcement, healthcare is the number one zone where workplace violence occurs. And dental practices are part of that healthcare umbrella. So we're not just talking emergency rooms or, scenarios where there might be more volatility. Disgruntled patients are one of the biggest category of workplace violence that we have in the country. So it is a problem that needs to be addressed. And I can tell you that we can get ahead of that curve significantly by the physical technological approach coupled with the human factor.
Yeah, I mean, I love all what you're sharing. You're really speaking the language of the dentist. We talk to patients about being proactive, and brushing their teeth and taking care of their oral health. And then sometimes when you have to be reactive, when, you break a tooth in half, on a hard walnut. And it sounds like you guys kind of put that same type of thought process into your training.
That's such a great analogy. I love that analogy because we literally follow the same path. It's preparedness for us, it's information, and it's protection. And those three verticals give you that prevention and response capacity.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I wanted to give our audience, this taste test of what you do. I was so, impressed and really enamored with what you had shown in our, class at Vistage, both with just, in some ways, it's a strange version to call it fun to do the physical activity. But, when you're in a classroom setting and you get to do physical activity, it gets you engaged. Would you go to practices locally if they were locally? Could practices hire you and your team to come in person? Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. And we travel all over the country. I mean, it's, the reason why the e-learnings are such a good way to sort of scale, if you will, this information into the marketplace is because we can't be everywhere at all times, but we do a lot of hands-on training, and that's what I love to do. So, by all means, reach out to me and we can schedule that. And I travel on a regular basis throughout the country doing this.
Awesome. I want to wrap up in a few minutes, but in dentistry, we have HIPAA, right? I can't share people's private information without their consent, but in your world of bodyguarding, I know that's not a word, are you able to share with us any of the famous people that you were tasked with protecting?
I can, only the ones that have given me the permission to do so. But we protected some celebrities, folks like Tom Cruise. We protected Lucy Liu at one point on an overseas mission, if you will. There's a few people like that that have been, very supportive and welcoming of us, mentioning our work with them. Most of it, though, is in fact totally confidential.
Yeah, I could imagine, but I know our dental people, we always like a little drama, Sam. So that's, we like a good name dropping. So we appreciate that. Appreciate you sharing us some value with us today. We're going to develop some programs with you hand in hand, some virtual e-learning programs. We're going to do a seed course. Then once you have that platform ready, please let us know, because I want to get that out. What's cool about dental practice owners is most of them are just phenomenal people, and most of them want to protect their patients' teams and themselves, but it's just very complex to run a dental office and have to do all of these things. So we appreciate you developing this platform to make something that's really a difficult subject and a scary subject easier for us to digest.
That's my mission.
And how, if someone wanted to reach out to you from this, they're watching this later, what's the best website for them to go to do that?
So we just launched our new website, liveready.co. That's the current URL is liveready.co. That's the easiest way to get all the information about us and to reach out to me. My email is on there, the information email that's on there in the contact page. I see all of them. So feel free to send it. We'll get it and I'll be monitoring it.
Awesome. And where are you? I think I know, but I just want to confirm, where are you based, geographically?
We're based in Pittsburgh. So
Pittsburgh. We'll come to Philadelphia for one of these sometime. We'll put something together in Philadelphia. Cheese steaks and personal security. People come for that.
That sounds fantastic.
I was going to say, we'll hang around. We're going to go off Facebook Live, but thanks so much for sharing with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Paul.
Awesome job, Sam. You were awesome. That was great. I really was. You're an awesome presenter. So that was perfect. We have a few people in the chat. If somebody wanted to ask you a particular question, or a Nacho team member wanted to ask a question of any kind, feel free to ask Sam. As I'm for that, feel free. I'll read one off if we get any. So we should do. What would be? Is there what you did for Vistage? I would love to maybe also think about doing something like that in Philadelphia, over the next 6 months. My team and I could put that together. That would be
most definitely.
And then I didn't touch on the show, but I meant to. There's something called DSOs, which are dental service organizations. They're kind of like the CVSs of dentistry. So there are these groups that have 5, 10, 20, 50 practices. And sometimes, you know, maybe one of their heads would want to come to a training and then, you know, roll out the e-learning platform, because their challenge with their groups is, you know, they got to do something for one office. They got to do it for 37 offices. So your e-learning platform would be great. So when that is starting to be developed, or, you know, able to, let me know.
Absolutely. So we literally spent 3 weeks filming in, I think it was June, you know, so it was just last month. And part of it was for a project for one of our bigger clients that they needed these done, and we're rolling them out for them. But we concurrently filmed workplace violence prevention. We did a manager's training, and we did a critical incident response training. And those are going to be basically, that information is universal. It doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, what organization, the information contained in those 3 modules are universal. So we're going to package that up. And once it's packaged up, I'll work with you. I'll send them to you in their raw form.
Perfect.
And like, we'll figure out how to sort of like bookend it or modify it however it needs to be for, you know, for dental practices, and we'll just get it out the door.
Awesome. Well, this was a great start to all of this. My team will get you the recording of it. Not your team. Did I miss anything? People hanging with me here?
No, I just wanted to say, Sam, when you have those ready to go, that's when we should do your course with Dental Nachos, and then you could promote that at the end.
Yeah,
that sounds good. And just so you guys know, what I did with Vistage, Paul, in our internal terms, we call that an in-power class. Okay, it's just sort of our own internal, like how we orchestrate that first phase of true personal security that had nothing to do really with workplace, but is universally appropriate. There's another one called a radar class. Both of those the radar class is all about situational awareness. So I've done the radar class a lot, just a ton of times by Zoom. It's a great hands-on Zoom interactive. I ask questions, they go into the chat, watch this video, tell me what you see. We break it down. It's a phenomenal class from the standpoint of this medium. So there's a couple ways to do things. We could stick to the workplace related stuff, or we could also do these offshoots into the.
I like that a lot. I mean, because we have a community of, you know, that would be really want to see that. So maybe that is also, I'll let you and Amanda and the team talk. We could do another longer webinar where you show the videos and you do things. I think that would be incredibly interesting and valuable.
It's cool. It's like a 1-hour class. So.
Yeah, that's great for us. We produce stuff like that all the time on our Nacho TV stuff. Well, awesome. Well, I'm thrilled I met you at Vistage, and we're going to do a lot of good for the dental community. And you got to come visit us in Philly sometime, have a cheesesteak, and we'll talk about more stuff.
I'd love that. All right. Thank you so much.
Enjoy, guys. Talk to you guys later. Have a great day.